What if legacy isn't just about what you leave behind, but the bold, authentic impact you create and fearless leadership that inspires global movements empowering women to thrive? Welcome to Beyond the Quo. I'm Stacey Luces, where we dive deeply into breaking boundaries, redefining success, and leading authentically. Today, I'm your host, and I'm thrilled to welcome an extraordinary guest, a favorite mentor and friend, and I don't know, so many things to me of mine, Violette de Ayala. You'll correct me there. Violette is a Cuban-American serial entrepreneur. She is also the founder of FemCity, which we'll talk about a little bit more, an international best-selling author, a business strategist, and a deep advocate for women's empowerment. From being quoted in Forbes, Environmental Glamour Success, to leading initiatives within the White House Women's Environmental Leaders Program and creating global opportunities for women, Violette really has redefined what it means to lead boldly and live authentically. Today, we're going to explore so many things, but definitely her remarkable legacy to building and reframing success, not only for women just starting out, but women who are well established in their businesses, while staying true to her authentic self and showing us how to do it alongside her by leading by example, and definitely in spaces where women are underrepresented. I would say get ready to take some notes, lean in, and be inspired. So let's get started. Violette, welcome to Beyond the Quo. I'm so thrilled and honored to have you with us.
So happy to be here, Stacey. This is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. So, question. One of the things I admire most about you is your ability to take things that people wouldn't normally talk about and share so vulnerably that it inspires us to action. And I think that sometimes people do that in a way that's contrived, but you share so openly and just matter-of-factly that it causes us to pause and rethink situations in our lives that may have debilitated us, but you use those things to inspire us. How, and I don't want to call that a skill, I think it's just an innate sense of part of who you are. How have you honed that throughout the years so that it comes so naturally?
I feel that every time I share an aspect of my life, I always start with the question, what's my intention? Yeah. So if I lead in with my intention as an example is to share my story of poverty to wealth as an example. And what's the story that's going to help resonate that? So instead of looking at the self and saying how am I going to shine the brightest? How am I going to look the best? I actually start from the intention of what's the most powerful way I can convey this message? It doesn't matter about my ego. It doesn't matter about the way I look. It's really what matters most is how it connects to the other human and how it empowers them to move forward. And so I think that's the difference is that versus I think most humans would approach it by saying, I want to look, as great as I can be in this kind of narrative that I'm going to share. I use the opposite. I've already hit rock bottom. I've already told everyone I've lived on welfare, food stamps. So there's no, I have nothing to hide. Yeah. I am what I am. And you either like me or you don't. So there's no fear of being judged. And so if I just come across from that perspective of what's the most powerful way I can convey this through storytelling. And I believe that when we share stories of our own journeys, it empowers other people versus saying we should do A, B, and C. Well, great. That's great. But show me how it's applicable. Show me an example of, it's when you want to look better in pictures. Okay. Put your chin closer to your chest. Okay, fine. But what does that look like, right? Yeah. So when you show someone a picture of here's what it looks like when you don't do it, and here's what it looks like when you do it, then you're oh, I can see it. I can visualize it. It's the same thing with storytelling. So I think that's the magic is just sharing vulnerably and not with any other thought of being judged or what people will think, because the message will resonate with people that it needs to resonate with. And for those, they'll just pass it by.
How can that work in baby steps? And I'll give you a perfect example. Okay. I had breakfast just now with somebody I consider to be just a phenomenal powerhouse, heart, soul, doing, I like to call it God's work in the community with children with disabilities and adults with disabilities. And she was saying that she had to give a speech up at FAU, or it could have been Lynn University, but it was about herself. And it took her 27 hours of just thinking and stressing about what to write. Whereas if it were for the foundation, she could go up on any platform worldwide and speak about that very confidently. And I tried to think of, like, put myself in that position, because a few years ago it was hard for me to do what you just said, like be so authentic and open and raw. And I think it is a learned skill for people that have been wanting to stand in perfection for fear of judgment. What can it look like for someone that, like my friend from this morning, that feels so foreign, but it also, you're hungry for it because you know that that's where different magic lays?
Yep. I thought I turned just... I feel like sometimes when we're still in the narrative of our own story, it's hard to kind of organize our thoughts. Yeah. It's almost like sometimes we just have to go through a process of healing and discovering what our journey meant and how we can share it without really diving into the ego. So I feel many years ago when Steve and I were in the throes of like, maybe decades ago, of like poverty or whatever, I probably would have had a really hard time. Yeah. I probably would have had a really hard time organizing the thoughts because there's so much emotion still connected to it. Yeah. I feel like once you've healed from a certain situation, then you're able to clinically look at it as just a factual piece of it and embed it into your stories without really having
that attachment.
Yeah, there's no attachment to it. So it's kind of like a movie that I watched about myself, but it's like I wasn't really in it, but it is my story. So I feel, those are the things that have helped me to get better at storytelling and better at connecting with humans. And at the end of the day, I think it's really hard with social media. I feel that we're constantly still searching for approval. And, I saw a meme yesterday that said, we get 20 likes on a post on social media and we feel like a failure. Yeah. But the reality is if 20 people said, damn girl, Stacey, you look amazing. You know what I mean? Like you've 20 people said that. It's like so amazing. So I think the definitions have changed and it makes it harder for humans to feel okay stepping in the spotlight and not being judged. And what if you say the wrong thing? And also being so cautious of your words, where I feel like if you just come from heart and you don't worry about all those things and you just share it as raw as it can be with the intention of helping the other human that's listening, I think that it helps. But we get stuck in the weeds. I mean, we all do. We just get stuck in the weeds and we're just like, oh my gosh. And, and then the perfectionism. I feel like the pandemic broke me of perfectionism. I remember, I was doing these Instagram lives and one day I showed up and I was like, my nose was all red from blowing it so hard. And I was, my asthma was acting up, but I showed up for the Instagram live and because I promised I would. And one of our members, Lori Hunt, later on, she sent me a message and she was like, you inspired me to just show up. Here you are with like boogers out of your nose and, like
she totally called it out.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't say boogers, but it was like, I know what she meant, but it was like, you know what? It's okay to show up imperfectly. And that has been almost like something I search for now where I'm like, where can I be imperfect in my life? Yeah. Because that it broke me because I was so like, it has to be perfect. It has to be this. I'm like, you know what? It's fine if the connection gets lost or you mess up your words a little bit or you have lipstick on your teeth or your eyelashes like hanging over your eyes. I think it's okay. It makes it so it's just real.
Yes.
And so I hope that helps.
It does. It does. I think one of the things too, so my daughter is 18, Alyssa, and I know your daughters are in college and graduating and doing the things we did, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
How has the way that you've lived your life and the way that you're living your life and the things that you're doing and the impact that you're having with hundreds, if not thousands of women across the country, how do you think that inspires them? And a different question, do you feel like there are parts of them that are like have to live up to who you are? And I say that because like my daughter, I was dressed up the other day. I was going to like a gala or something. And I was super fancy. And I don't look like that on the norm, right? And I saw her face.
I don't know. I've seen you traveling. I think you look rather fancy all the time. Like even a t-shirt and jeans. I've seen you. But yes,
I don't do sloppy well. But she had this look that I wanted to explore.
Yeah.
And I asked her. I was very casual about it. Kind of, doing dishes and trying not to be interrogatory. And I said, do you compare yourself to me sometimes? It was a very honest conversation I would have never had with her in the past. But me being me now, I want to just open these doors. And she was very quiet and she said, yeah. And I said, does it make you feel good or not as good? Like, is it, mom is very kind, and I'm like her? Or is it mom looks a certain way and because body types were different, like, we're just different women physically. And I know that in high school and in middle school, there was a lot of emphasis on cliques.
Yeah.
How has the way you live your life and showing up and being so loved? I feel like any room you walk into, we're all fangirling because you've earned that, right? Because of who you are. Yeah. How do they respond to that?
That's an interesting question because the girls are so similar to me.
Or your son. I mean, it doesn't.
I think they have really done a great job of embracing their individualism.
I love
As
that.
an example, Bianca showed up, my middle child. She went to Spain just for a week with some friends, and she had her nose pierced, right? And so I had looked at getting my nose pierced like a decade ago, and I was staying with
I'm still looking at it, but I was like, can my nose survive that?
I know, exactly. So my friend Rosanna, we went away, we did like a girls' weekend for Mother's Day, and she has one, and I was asking her questions, and I almost passed out when she was sharing like all the details. I was like, it was this stuff for me. But anyway, so the girls did the cartilage piercing, and I almost passed out. Like I took them to like the best tattoo place in Miami that like, does all the like the sterilization. Like I really spent time. Anyway, my point is I feel like they're just such great individuals. Like they have their own vibe and their own sense of self, and they're different, but at the same time they're very similar. They're both very confident women, and I feel it's because I have always been very honest with my own journey and embracing however they want to show up. So you want to pierce the nose, go for it. I said, as long as you're okay. And it did, you know what I mean? Like it looks like it hurts. I heard it hurts, and even the treatment of it. But you know what? Like they're both stepping into now as young women. One's 25 and the other one's 18. Stepping into the world in their own flavor has been really beautiful to see. So I don't know. I've never really asked them that question. That would be a really great question to ask during the holidays since we're all going to be together. I will say, Bianca really stepping out, living in New York City. She went to NYU, embracing her
independence.
Cuban, her independence and her Cuban culture.
Yes.
That was really interesting to see that she really discovered her Cuban culture, stepping away from her Cuban family, going into NYU and then like chairing the Hispanic, Cuban club or whatever it is. So that was a really fascinating thing to see how they kind of are finding their own selves. So I don't think I answered your question, but I will ask it because it's a beautiful question.
Because sometimes, and I asked this because my ear was bothering me before we went to Spain. And I went to an ENT, and this Asian woman was so generous and gracious and like squeezed me in because my flight was in all the things. And her photos of her daughters, graduating law school and all of this stuff were proudly on display. All of their diplomas, like there was more stuff about her daughters than about herself. And you could tell she had so much pride in that. And so I complimented her kind of on their accomplishments. And she was super sad. And I was like, oh no, what happened? And she said, she said they're struggling because they're so accomplished and such high achievers because they watched her trajectory as an immigrant and kind of doing all the things. And now they're in their 30s struggling because it's like looking for fulfillment differently. It's like probably stuff we stumble upon in our 40s. For me, it was in my 40s. Like what does fulfillment and success look like? And so I think for me with my kids and my nieces and nephews, I'm very cognizant that I had to redefine success to find true happiness. And I'm almost stealth mode coaching them and teaching them meditation and teaching them how to like right size a problem. Like it's not an enterprise. Everything is bad. Like sometimes we say everything is going wrong. Well, no, like specifically what is going wrong. And so teaching them how to put the problem into a thimble and not create a mountain out of it. And it's been a work in progress. It's almost like I'm learning to parent myself while learning to parent them differently. But it was just such a unique perspective. Shout out to ENTs everywhere that I had never had before. That we think our successes is going to inspire people, but what about the ones that it's like, oh, I can never do that? How do we create a balance?
I'm obsessed with what you just said because I will share when I turned 40, So I started having health issues.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know this story. I started having health issues, and I went to the doctor, and he's like, "Oh, your blood pressure's up." And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, "Yeah, I have anxiety. I can't breathe." And he took my phone away. But at the time, it was a BlackBerry. That's how long ago.
Oh my gosh, right?
It was like
the little ball roller.
BlackBerry. Oh my gosh! So he took it away. He left the room, closed the door, turned off the light, and I was like, "Oh, what's he doing here?" He came back in like 10 minutes later, took my blood pressure, and it was down. He's like, "You're doing too much. You've got to slow down."
That's simple. I have goosebumps from that.
So I looked at my life, and at the time I sat on 6 different boards. I was raising a lot of money for charities. I had started FemCity. I had my own PR agency. I had 3 kids in 3 different schools.
You weren't busy at all.
At all. But I will say the ego loved when people would say, "Oh my gosh, Violet, how do you do it all? You're amazing." And it took my health to really waken myself up to say like, okay, I don't want to have, my father had heart attacks and heart surgery since he was like 30 years old. I'm like, I don't want to live that life. So what do I need to get rid of? And so I went through and I resigned from all the boards, and I felt, I can still donate and I can still support them. I just don't have those commitments, as those pressures of like having to raise so much money. And, put the kids into school, and, I kind of like started condensing, started doing carpool, started asking for help. And really the inspiration was, I didn't realize that I was actually telling other women through my actions that they weren't enough. Like I was feeding off that ego of like everyone saying, "Wow, you're so amazing. You do so many things. It's so incredible." At the end of the day, I was really showing other women like, this is how you have to do it. You have to do everything, and you have to almost die of exhaustion to like matter. And that's not healthy. So through my actions, I was like, I need to really step down so I can show women that you can say no to things and live life of balance and have health and have wellness. So things that you focus on. So I went through that when I was 40, and sure enough, like my health started, changing, and I started kind of I loved feeling like that no anxiety. Like at first I felt like, that stress that you get when you have to make like 3 different events and you have to be this, and there's like a endorphin or some sort of like, I was thriving on that. That is the worst thing. So really when I started doing those kinds of changes, it started to share it within my circle so that women could see like, it's okay to say no. It's okay to step down. It's okay to prioritize your wellness, because I felt like I was feeding into this society.
The hustle culture.
That is not sustainable. So I love that you shared that, because absolutely it's like and teaching myself as I teach other people that this is not the way to live.
And it's not always a perfect recipe. No. I've seen a lot of people trying to perfect sourdough bread. I feel like if I had to find a food, I'm obsessed with sourdough bread for some reason right now. Obsessed.
A bread club.
But there's a bread club?
Bread club that she started, and she's got, I guess, there's a mother when you make sourdough bread. I don't know if that's the kombucha or I don't know. She has the host or the.
I can't even continue this podcast. I want to go home immediately and join this bread club.
Bread club.
I feel too, and I want to bring up your, Cuban-American sort of background. You speak very openly about your parents and your grandparents, and like your entire family was part of their DNA seems to be entrepreneurship. Yeah. And you always have had that visibility and exposure, but also it's like building muscle memory. It is a comfortable space for you because that's how they talk. That's what they did, right? A lot of the women and men, a lot of the people listening are midlife, 40s, 50s, probably early 60s. And I picked Beyond the Quo because we are comfortable in status quo. And beyond that feels intimidating, large, hairy and audacious, undoable. And I had a guest on, and he made a even more startling statistic to me, because I'm thinking midlife is like 40s and 50s. He's like, no, if the average woman lives to be 74, then really if you're 38, 39, even 40, you're already in that zone. Yeah. And a big sense of urgency, whether we are verbalizing it or not. I think our psyche and our subconscious spiritual self is saying, hey, the runway in front of you is shorter than the one behind. What do you say to people that are really feeling that rub, that sense that, what am I doing? But are afraid, unwilling, feel intimidated, unsure about exploring things outside of the status quo. And it doesn't have to be quit your job and start an empire. It could be little things like focusing on your health and scaling back from boards. What do you say to those women, you're maybe 15 years into living differently, that are feeling that and feel trapped?
So I feel that the beauty, I'm not a fan of social media all the time, but I will say what I love about it is that we're able to see the stories in lifetime, like just, appear to us. So as an example, Train with Joan, who's like a big influencer on Instagram. I think she's like in her upper 70s, maybe the beginning of 80s. And her story is very inspirational in the sense that she was always out of shape. She had health issues. And then she started working out with her daughters as a personal trainer. And then all of a sudden she's like in the most amazing shape of her life. She's now an influencer. She makes, a ton of money. She's got a book out and a coaching session. And so, the chick changed her life in the mid 70s, like changed her life.
Yes.
So, those stories are now more common for us to see
and more
witness.
Accessible, right?
Yeah, everyone can see them.
I love that.
And so, if you're sitting around and saying it's too late for me, as an example for myself. So when I was younger, I wanted to, be on Broadway. I wanted to dance. I wanted to perform. I like making people happy. Like that's and so at the time when I was younger, I was told you're brown and brown people don't really go on Broadway. And it was true at the time. I don't think that there were many brown people on Broadway. Yeah. And so I was kind of like, well, there goes that. And last year I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start doing more of that. So I've been doing more and more like commercials and more print ads and it's been really fun. Yeah. And so here I am 52 years old, in a sense, starting a whole new business and it brings me joy. And it's because I've seen other people do it on Instagram. And I'm like, you know what? They just changed their whole life. So why can't I? So if why not you?
I love that. And you've been really, it's been phenomenal to watch your silver hair. I call it the silver, right? The silver temptress transition.
My silver locks. Oh my gosh.
Tell me about how, because I feel like, and there was this whole conversation that I got fascinated with, which was the pretty privilege that, and it had to do with Halle Berry, who the first words out of anybody's mouth is she's so gorgeous or she's so pretty. Yeah. And she was stating that she wishes people would not say that as the first thing they say to her ever since she was a child. There's so much to her. And she went pretty hard on those that are using alternative healing methods and hormone replacement therapy and plastic surgery and stuff, meaning she's going natural. And that's part of her right. And I completely agree with what she said, maybe not how she said it, right? Because a lot of people took offense. Oh, okay. And I feel like part of you embracing being in your 50s and going silver and really empowering, because you get the most views on that. We laughed about that on the bus in Spain. Yeah. How's that been in the way that people react to you, or has it had any kind of impact, or you're like, no, I'm me?
So there's good, bad, and ugly for that. So the truth is, I wanted to do this silver hair transformation years ago because I was going to the salon every 3 weeks, and I was using Madison Reed. I was a former ambassador for Madison Reed, female brand, female founded, and I made friends with everyone there, so it was enjoyable. I was taking my laptop, and it was fine, but it was every 3 weeks. It's like 2 hours at the end of the day, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like I would blink, I would leave the salon, I would blink,
and be back there,
and silver hair was already there. So I'm like, this is crazy, and no one really supported me on that, when I years ago, when I was like, I want to do this, and everyone was like, you're crazy, you're too young, and you're gonna look so old. And so I kind of was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, I should have done it during the beginning of the pandemic when a lot of our members did. And finally one day I was like, this is it, I'm not doing it. As a matter of fact, no one believed me. I was sitting there at Madison Reed, and I told the girls, I said, that's it, you're not going to see me again. This is it. They're like, yeah, sure, Violet, sure. Yeah. And what I discovered is in the process that I have this whole entire personal brand that started to explode. Yes. And I feel like I should have gone with my gut years ago, because I feel like it would have been even bigger. You know what I mean? Because I would have been in it for longer.
Yeah. And I don't think people were ready as they are now, though.
Because more women are showing up in that space. Yes. And more women are showing up.
I feel like you are at the cusp of it.
Yeah.
Smart of you for thinking about it, but I feel like I'm going to challenge you on that a little bit. I think now is the time, because you've got people like Helen Mirren, Barbara, like all of them going into this alongside you.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking openly about menopause.
Yes.
And all of those things. You're right where you need to be with this.
So then I do get the most views. And then what's interesting is that even in acting and in my commercials and the gigs that I get, I have found that I'm getting more opportunities. Yeah. And because I am 50, I'll be 53. So when you think of 53, you really think of 43, like in today's advertisement world. You know what I mean? So when you're looking at, when people are asking for a 63-year-old woman, they're really thinking like a 53-year-old woman. So I'm getting more opportunities. I made more money this year than I have. And that's with my hair like still half and half, which is crazy. I mean, I booked something, it was like $20,000 a commercial in January, and half my head was silver and the other half was brown. So I slicked it back. So it's been interesting, like all the things, the good, bad, and ugly, the things that I thought would get, they're not. And then at the same time, I feel like there are all these questions that I ask myself, like, do I look older? Like, you know, like I'm trying to find my own place in this new world. And so I'm constantly asking questions about that. So it hasn't been like, boom, I'm silver hair and I'm 100% like confident. Like sometimes I do still question, like, you know, do I look older? Like, why am I even asking that? Like, you know, did someone say something? Did I hear something? Did I see something? Like what's making me feel this? Because I feel really good not treating my hair. Like I feel, you know, I have Hashimoto's, so I was having a lot of thinning. And so I feel like for the first time
I'm in the thick of it right now.
Yeah, I have thick hair for the thick looking hair. It's still kind of thin, but yeah. And so with the hormone replacement, I'm like stepping into that also. It's been a couple of years since I've been in menopause. And even today, those two women, when you picked me up at the train station, we had a whole completely very intimate conversation about HRT walking from the bathroom, and we hugged and everything. And so here are these two.
I thought these were like your besties.
Two strangers that just met them in the bathroom.
Yeah.
But
strangers on the Boca platform.
Yeah. And we just went into like, what are you, are you doing HRT? I'm like, I'm not, but I have all my friends are. So I'm starting to learn about it. And, you know, I'm going to see this doctor now in New York City that is like the best in the world, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, I am in my own journey of discovering. I don't know the answers. I'm just doing what feels best in this moment. Yeah. But there has definitely been the good, bad, and ugly along the way. And anyway, so just trying to want to convey to your listeners that it's not always perfect. You know, you're just learning as much as you can.
What I love about this, I'll tell you what I just learned. And I think people think learning has to be big, momentous things. Like you go on a retreat and you train for 20 hours. It could be micro-learning, right? Yeah. An insight I just had was that, you know, reinvention doesn't always have to be momentous. And I think that growth and reinvention go hand in hand. And what I love about what you just said is, even during this process, making the decision, you know, thinking about it a couple of years ago, executing on it, sticking to it, riding the wave of uncertainty, but also confidence. And it's bringing you things you didn't envision, but also you still are stumbling along with it. There's such magic in that because we're built to grow. And I think that if we think about doing something differently as an opportunity to grow and stumble along, right? Like we didn't learn to walk coming out the womb, like, you know, like I think that will change our enthusiasm around it. A friend of mine said that your body doesn't know, like the physical and physiological reaction you have to anxiety and excitement, your body doesn't know the difference. The chemical reactions are literally the same. The thoughts are different. And I was like, oh, I love that. So heart racing, a little bit of sweaty armpits.
Yeah.
Right? Cheeks warm. Think about it. Sweet. It's powerful.
Yeah, my aura ring will gauge to see if I'm stressful, like if I'm stressed. And sometimes I'll look at it and I'm like, what was I doing in that moment that was stressed? I'm like, oh, I was just having a conversation. You know what I mean?
You were excited.
I was excited.
I love
so
that.
It's like,
it
was like stress doesn't have to be bad. It was like, my heart rate was up and I was just really excited. I'm sure right now it's probably like, boop, you know, like a little stressed because I'm super engaged.
Yes.
And
I love
having
that.
great conversations.
When I thought about interviewing you, and like you said, I've known you for years and I want to talk a little bit about FemCity. So I've been, when I stumbled into FemCity, right? I had my first business was personal branding and styling, like 7-8 years ago. And somebody said, you have to go to these luncheons. There's at the time it was just Boca chapter. And I walked in and, you know, it was nice. I was just busy, right? I re-engaged with FemCity during the pandemic because I was lonely. because I had not taken the time. We moved to Boca 10 years ago, but I was still very much 60% in DC where I worked at the time. And so I didn't have to make friends here.
Right.
My crew, I would see every month and we'd hang out and whatever. But I felt lonely.
Yeah.
And I revisited FemCity. And you showing up messy and us showing up messy and scrappily and afraid, right? And doing it anyway. I was inspired to do more. And so I was on the DEI committee that you had, led a chapter of FemCity International. So I feel like when you love and appreciate something the way that I do FemCity and the ethos that the essence of it, that's when you want to contribute more. And you do that so well, because a lot of us contribute, like our hands are raised, we're cracking our knuckles trying to like volunteer for stuff because we understand what it did for us. And I want to say, in terms of a legacy, and I I'm such a nerd, Violet, you know this.
I think we're both.
So here are some things I don't know that you've thought about, and maybe you have, right? And I want to give a shout out to Lynn Pelzer. I love her. Lynn's the COO of FemCity. I was like, I'll tell you the chat GPT prompt I use. Violet's work through FemCity, and I had put in questions I wanted to ask, directly addresses many of the challenges faced by women business owners. And she creates a supportive ecosystem for some of these disparities. How do her initiatives align with some of the more challenging things that women business owners go through? And so that was my prompt. And it said, you close the funding gap. And I don't know that you would have thought about it like that, but It said, women entrepreneurs face 40% lower funding rate than men and receive smaller loan sizes. Here's how FemCity helps. Through workshops, networking events, and financial education and resources, FemCity empowers women to navigate funding challenges. Violet equips members with tools to pitch effectively, connect with investors, and this community ensures that women-owned businesses have greater access to capital investment opportunities.
Wow.
You didn't think about it like that, right?
No.
So then I said, okay, what about building resilience? Women-owned businesses face higher risk during economic downturns, such as during times of recessions, inflation, especially as we saw during the pandemic. Violet's leadership in fostering a community-centered approach helps women build resilience because we focus on, and I know this for sure, collaboration over competition, ensuring that we have strategies, resources, and most importantly, support systems, which improve our ability to weather challenges and sustain our businesses. I will tell you, beginning of this year, the only person I showed up for was Julie. Julie Allison has become a really good friend. I met her through FemCity, right? Increasing revenue potential. I launched my own membership with Lola Small, ex-FemCity member. I co-authored a best-selling book with a bunch of FemCity. So I say that to say that increasing revenue potential, speaking opportunities, because they've seen me with you. Like, I say that because it's not just a community or a networking organization. I feel like what you've built and what we are growing together with you to do, I don't think that you, and maybe you have, sat in it and really relished that success and that impact, right? Combating isolation and industry limitations. Promoting authentic leadership and reframing success. We talked about that a little bit. But how does that, in terms of a legacy, you already left one, right? You can own that or not. I feel like sometimes we want to downplay how freaking big and amazing this is. Yeah. But what legacy do you hope to leave, knowing all these things? But what's your like one, what's the one thing that you hope everybody takes away from kind of your life and your journey?
Well, I'm just still like in awe.
I'll give you this page.
Yeah. I'm just like, wow. I think if I could leave one thing behind, it is in a world that is politically divided. I wish and I hope that women would see that perhaps all of us are puppets in this world. And seeing societal messages about women fighting and not collaborating and competing and, it's like, I just wish that we would just see that we are so much stronger together. To remove all of the titles and the narratives, everything that we've heard all this time, I crave that.
Yeah.
I crave for women just to not discuss religion or political affiliation or sexuality. Like I really would just love for women to just see all women as equal, as beautiful, as strong, as great big pieces of this thread that we're doing together. That to me is like the undertones of what I envision that I can do more of. Like every day, Lynn always laughs, like that I wake up, I'm like, what can we do more? What can we do more? So that's what I, you know, if I could do something more like that, where it's just, you know, I saw a meme the other day that had like, it had Republicans and Democrats in a cage and they were fighting. And then it had like, you know, billionaires on the surrounding kind of like working on their own stuff. And so it was such a great visual for me, because I feel like if women could really just remove all the things that are being told to them and just focus on their fellow sisters, regardless of background, education, religion, political affiliation, again, you know, like LGBTQ, like whatever, all those things, removing them all and just seeing each other for these beautiful vessels of love and compassion and collaboration, and what a more beautiful world it would be. So that's for me, like, you know, can I do more? Like, I don't think my work would ever be done. Or our work would never be done.
I want to say that in my 40s, you have been a mentor. And in the military, so I worked in the Pentagon, and we had this thing where they called, the military is a force. And in anything, let's say you are a CEO or a business owner, your staff is your force, your workforce, right? And you, in essence, have to be a force multiplier. So a force multiplier, and I'll try to like do this some you know, not butcher it, if you will, is someone that, let's say you have 10 things that you need to do to get done. If you pick the one thing that, by virtue of doing and focusing on that one thing, maybe the other 6 or 7 become solved because you picked the right thing. A force multiplier in terms of a human or a spirit embodies some of those characteristics. Like, you multiply the force to do better. And I think you are one of those people. And I think that we need more of those people. And I think that the challenge becomes having you all not burn out or become a little bit disillusioned or feel used. Because I would envision people come to you and some people always want something, right? How do you protect innately who you've become and you're still evolving into, and not get caught up in the noise? Because I think new entrepreneurs, Sandra and I were talking about this on an episode we taped. Sometimes you compare yourself to people above you and you show up differently. But what do you say, like, how do you contain who you are so that you continue to do the work in the world?
Yeah.
And I want you to talk about Stephen a little bit. Like, I feel like sometimes we forget our partners and like the impact they have on our capacity for you to be a force multiplier, for you to show up the way that you show up. I'm sure he plays a part. Like, what's that dynamic like?
Yeah. So your first question regarding the way I kind of protect myself, I think I'm really blessed to have Lynn and Kyra in my life, and a team of presidents and founder circle members also, I would say, that do a really good job of like making sure that I don't get into the noise. They're almost like my protectors. So I love that. They definitely protect me.
They're commanders in chief.
So, and the founders program, as you know, like that's just a small, yummy group. And I feel like we are just so close, and I feel like they are an army, you know, going back to your example. So I'm really lucky about that, because I definitely I'm an empath, so like yesterday walking into my daughter's graduation, I started crying and I was like, why am I crying? Like, and it was like just the emotions of everyone in the space was just overwhelming for me. So I feel like Lynn and Kyra and all of you do a really good job of like, taking some of that away, and whether it's feeding my soul, like feeding my soul more. Like I know when we gather in the founder circle, like it feeds my soul, and it's like that private space for me to just be with you all. So I feel like that's a gift, like my support circle, even my best friends. Like I have a really good group of like 5 or 6 best friends that, that they are really, they don't ask anything of me. They honor who I am. They celebrate me for my authenticity, my vulnerability. So like I am really, really lucky and very blessed. When it comes to Steve, he has been my rock. Absolutely. Like, even, like this year I put in a ton of cash into FemCity. You know what I mean? Like I put in a ton and he was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I believe in it. So sometimes when it's like not, we made some changes, and when you make changes, there's a dip in revenue. We're membership based. All the membership fees go into supporting us. And so when there's not, so I put in a chunk of money and he's just like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, so the trust factor. I've been doing this work for 15 years and there have been ebb and flows. We made it through the pandemic. We had a lot of competitors that didn't make it through. And we had a lot of other chambers that we reached out to and we said, what can we do to support? Because I believe that we need to have all the chambers. We need to have other women organizations. It cannot just be FemCity. It has to be others as well. But he has been incredibly supportive of my vision, and he gets what I'm on and the power, and even the conversations that we're having now. I'm like, where I get more agitated about how women are seen, and he's definitely, he's been a solid partner, and I for him as well. He's growing his business as well.
I love that.
It's a good partnership.
So there's so many like takeaways here. I feel like the number one thing. And I'll tie it back to something. I watched this series on Netflix called The Blue Zone, How to Live to Be 100.
I watched
and you've hit on, you're going to be 100. Let's just put it that way. But
I hope so.
The number one thing is the physical home that you have, your body and your spirit and your soul and like all of those things. The second thing is true community. And you've express that in such a great way, right? It starts with community of self. I think that we always think community has to be external. Really, if you are not in commune and in community with yourself, like that's the first pillar that's broken, right? Like you can't build sandcastles on like quicksand. Yeah. And so I think community with yourself and what you need and listening to yourself, but also you've talked about having a close circle of friends, which I know for a lot of women that are like, well, I don't have any good friends. That takes work, and that takes you showing up and making the effort.
And I just got that, by the way, like the last 5 years, like that was not, that's like a recent thing.
And the thing is that I feel like we have to show up as what we are looking for.
Yeah. Right?
And then, Lynn, Kyra, the community, extended community that you have, your children. The other thing is a higher purpose. Yeah. Like having a sense of, not legacy. I think some people are like, oh, legacy, they think money. It's what's the mark? What is your energy that you're leaving in the world? And I think that not having that, you hear these stories of people that retired and then within 2 years they're sick or dying. Like having some sort of purpose. You've talked about what your purpose is and what you hope to see in the world. There are a few others, drawing a blank here, but I feel like it was such a simple recipe, Violet. It was so simple. Yeah. One of it was spirituality, but it was so simple. And I like sat with that little, I thought there was going to be some kind of epic quantum like nugget in there. And it was like, oh shit, it's just like live a good life. Like loosely follow the 10 commandments. Yeah. Right? Absolutely. And so I love that in everything that we've talked about, it boiled down to kind of these core tenets that are a bit of a roadmap for anybody. And I'm going to try to release this episode for the new year, like the first week, because I think it's important to like level set for many people. And I think they could find so much value from this. So yeah, I want to thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Stacey, you're an amazing interviewer.
Thank you.
I
am thrilled with that because you've been everywhere.
Yeah, you are a great interviewer.
Thank you.
This was so great. I mean, even like I just still in awe over all the kind things that you shared about me. I'm just so grateful to.
You're worthy of that.
Thank you.
You really are. Like even looking back on, what can I ask her? I'm like, look at all of this and look at this and look at this. But I think at the core of it, Violet. And I always think back on our little bus drive to, I forget where we're going.
There were so many bus rides.
FemCity does amazing international retreats. And we went to the Rock of Gibraltar. And you and I were like shouting over like a few people's heads. We were like talking about something and laughing uproariously at like really dumb stuff. But I think what I appreciate the most about you and the biggest learning for me as an entrepreneur, as a mother, as a leader is to treat everyone as if they are the most important thing right in front of you at this moment. And I've seen you do that in luncheons and speaking engagements and on the bus, and it doesn't matter. And it is probably one of the most powerful lessons for me, as I navigate my softer side coming out of corporate, is really sitting in pocket with the person in front of me and not only paying attention, but just allowing them to be themselves. Yeah. And I think you do that really well. And it's something that I think would enrich a lot of our lives if we just learned how to do that better. Yeah,
imagine like just sitting there and I know. Like we do this event called Karmatopia and
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's speed network. I made it up like 15 years ago, whatever it was. And it's speed networking. But you sit in front of a woman and it's like musical chairs at the same time. It's like musical chairs and speed networking had like a baby or speed dating. Yeah. And so I ask a question or the president does. It could be something like, what's your favorite book and why? And the timer goes off and it's 2 minutes and you can only listen to the other woman sharing. So you don't say anything, you just listen. And then the timer goes off and the same question's asked. It's reversed. So now you go and I only listen for 2 minutes. And then after you write down 5 beautiful words you felt about that woman when she was sharing. You put them in a little takeout. I do like the little Chinese takeout boxes with like a FemCity sticker.
Oh my God. I've never had one of those. How can we do those?
You put it in a little thing and
it's like love notes.
And then and so then you go and you do it 3 times. So you meet 3 women and different questions. And at the end you have a little box of 15 beautiful words that were thought of about you. Yeah. And I think like imagine if we just did that, like just said kind things and just like listened, especially to people that were not like us, so that we kind of expand the perspective of different topics. But we did that in Vegas when we had a really big chapter there years ago, and the women went home and they wrote the words in lipstick on a mirror around them, and it was just, I mean, they cried. It was just so beautiful. So I love that you ended the podcast episode with that, because imagine the power if we just listened to each other. And then and
have no expectations, right? Like just
listen. Yeah. Active listening means you don't know what you're going to say. You're not thinking about what you're going to say. You're literally just listening to them. And then when it's your time to respond, that's the moment you think about, what do I think about this conversation?
And I will tell you, I did, because of course I work for Homeland Security, we studied body language. When two people and their energies are in sync, they mirror each other. And I was on the side note observing, we were mirroring each other a little bit as we were talking. I think that is a good way for people to gauge when you are in sync with someone is you mirror them, even on Zoom. You lean in, you put your hand on your chin. It's so crazy, but it's almost like when you hug the person that you love, eventually your breathing starts to be the same. It's rhythmic, and you don't try, but that's the power of flow and alignment, right?
That's beautiful.
I love that. So thank you for sharing your story, insights, and heart with us today. How can people find you? They can find you everywhere, but please give a great big shout out to FemCity and anything else you want.
Yeah, so FemCity, take a look at FemCity. We have a free membership there for you to try it out. And then personally, you can follow me on Instagram, violetteayala.com.
So to all of our listeners, I hope that today's episode inspired you to live authentically, redefine success, and consider the legacy that you want to leave behind. If this conversation resonated with you, please share it, like it, subscribe, hit me up with 5 stars, and join us for the next episode of Beyond the Quo. Don't forget, you can take, I have a free quiz. It's called Living Beyond Success. It kind of gives you an insight into things that maybe you need to keep the pulse on and take a check in with. And until next time, you already done the quo. It's time to go beyond. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks, Violet.
Thank you so much.
Love it.